Hi, my name's Tony Sharples and welcome to another episode of Old Dog New Tricks. I'm going to talk today about digital retirement planning. And in fact, I'm going to use the example of 3 Uber drivers that I've run into going around towns and their stories to try and give you some hints and tips in terms of how perhaps you could be looking at planning your retirement and how digital can fit into that planning process. Now, the first Uber driver that I'd like to talk about was a guy I ran into up on the Central Coast. I had to go up to Gosford one day to do something, which is a little town just up above Sydney. Now, I ran into a guy there. I had to do just a local trip between 2 places up there. I logged into the Uber app and came across the fact that there's only like 1 driver up there in the whole area, or there's very few. So this guy picked me up and we had a bit of a chat as we were driving along. Now, it's interesting. He grew up in Sydney. He had worked in Sydney all of his life. He had a dream to retire up in some little coastal town or something like that, rather than in the big city. So he decided to become an Uber driver up in these little country town areas. The interesting thing with that, and I think how it has worked out really well for him, is that rather than working in a pool of hundreds or thousands of Uber drivers bustling around the urban centres of Sydney, he's in a great position because he's really identified the market that he wants to go for. And I think he originally thought that when he went into those markets, what he would be doing is lots of little trips between the shopping centre and a town centre, lots of little trips between different parts of different towns and parts of the area and whatever. But what has in fact come out of that is that a lot of the trips he's doing are actually really big trips. There are a lot of people there who are used to using Uber, but were wanting to go down to Sydney Airport, up to Newcastle University and things like that. These are big, expensive trips. And he's now reached the point where he's almost completely booked out doing these trips. So I think a real learning there is that if you can think about the business that you're going to plan in retirement to either deliver that income stream or give you some enjoyment in life, try and think about where can I do this and how can I identify a white space out there where no one or few people are operating, and that I can really get into and leverage and build a business out of that. Now, the second Uber driver is a guy I ran into in Sydney in a trip just between 2 suburbs here. And his was a very, very different story. He had worked all of his life, and he decided that in order to build a retirement nest egg and to build something to sustain him through his retirement years, that he would take everything that he'd built up and he would sink it into something that would become his nest egg and his income stream moving forward. Now, unfortunately, what he did is he just went out and he sunk the money into a franchised food business in a shopping mall. It wasn't an area that he'd worked in before. He hadn't worked in retail. He'd never baked anything in his life, but he just thought, well, they must be successful. There's lots of them and I'll pay the money and they'll have a system and out we go. Now, the reality for him is that he spent 2 years working 16 hours a day and the business basically tanked and he lost everything, and he was driving an Uber around essentially because he had to. It was the only way that he had to make money these days. So I think is a really important lesson there to make sure that as you are planning what you're going to do in retirement, and particularly how you'll leverage marketing to drive that, is to not just go for a simple, easy, throw a lot of money in solution. Don't go for something where there's a massive capital investment up front and you're going to risk everything to do it. And I think certainly, and most importantly, not going into an area that is an area where you have no expertise and have never been into before, and you are really going to be taking a giant leap to get into that space. I think you are far more well served to go into something that you have some experience in and is a logical step forward for you. And this sort of leads into the third Uber driver that I ran into, who I got a lift with in Sydney, and his was interesting because he was driving for Uber and making good money out of it, but the money wasn't his driver. I mean, the great thing about this guy is that what got him up and out of bed every day and facing the world is he just loves driving around in his car, having a chat to people. So his ideal day was get up, so, a call comes in, he picks someone up, he has a really good chat with them driving around town, he drops them off, he picks someone else up, he has a really good chat with them, drives around town, and then he heads home for the night. And then he comes out and he does the same thing the next day. So his was very much a decision based on quality of life. And I think that is also a really important thing to keep in mind as you move forward with retirement planning. And I think, and this applies to pretty well any business that people tend to be successful in, is to really try and do something that you love and you have a passion for. But ideally, I think as you're going into retirement, because you don't want to risk everything, don't go and try and do a giant leap into what seems to be an easy solution or something that's very unfamiliar for you, and therefore entails a lot of risk. I've also had a look this week around a lot of sites that to see what sort of advice that people are offering people planning their retirement years. It's been an interesting exercise. I sort of break it down into a few categories. There seems to be a good lot of advice on things like estate planning, wills, funeral planning, and all of those sorts of things, as you'd expect. There also seems to be a good lot of information out there in terms of financial planning, superannuation, where should I invest my nest egg, how much will it cost me to live if I live to this age and to that age, and all of those sorts of things. Once again, there's a lot of that information out there. A lot of it's put out there by the big insurance companies or the government, or financial planning companies and things like that, and there's a good lot out there. I thought it was interesting because a lot of those, that just struck me that a lot of those seem to be an end game. It's like you reach retirement and everything stops, and all you do from that retirement day forward is survive. And I mean, we're going to all live for a very long time, and I think that's a really bad way to look at it. I think what you've got to look at is that I'm going to get to retirement, and then what am I going to do from there? I mean, perhaps I need some money, but perhaps I just need something to keep my mind active and alive as I move into those years. And when I look at marketing and business building advice and digital advice on those two fronts, I generally found that the marketing advice was fairly outdated and very much based on traditional things, talking about marketing funnels and how you can build a business out of selling things, buying things for one price and selling them for another price, leveraging garage sales and things like that. It just seemed to me to be information that was relevant maybe 20 years ago but hadn't been updated moving forward. On the other hand, there are a lot of people out there pushing digital, it's the future, go for it, but a lot of them are very focused on young people starting out, and a lot of them are also very focused on this notion that it's a big get rich scheme. You're going to get out there and, there are all these people going, and you will have a Ferrari like this and this wonderful house that I have, and it only took me 12 months and I did it all on Instagram and things like that. I mean, I just think that, though all of that pitching is based on tending to drive someone across to do a course where you've got to sign up and part with some money or something like that, or it's just like trying to get people to sign up for consulting or whatever. I mean, I think it really wasn't targeting the area that I want to target, which is to say, okay, how can you use digital, which is something that perhaps you're not that familiar with just because you didn't grow up with it, and how can you use that to really drive this future moving forward that's very planned out and very solid and moving forward. So I think there is a gap there in terms of people needing to understand that digital is a marketing tool. And they're just new tools, like we had TV and radio and print and local area marketing and sales tactics and all of those things before. Digital is just an add-on to those things. So very much moving forward, I'll be looking at digital platforms and trying to explain in terms of Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram and Google search and things like that, how you can use them as marketing tools to drive your business. But then if I go back to the Uber examples, I think you really have to have some good thought about what is your business. And I think that comes down to you. And you have to really think about, what am I good at? Where do I want to live? What sort of lifestyle do I want? How busy do I want to be? What sort of resources am I going to have? So I think once you make those decisions, then digital is just tools that fit in on top of that and help you drive it along. And my aim moving forward is to try and demystify some of those tools for people like you and people like me who didn't grow up walking around with a mobile phone in their pocket during their teen years. Okay, so I hope that gives you some good perspective on retirement planning and how digital fits. This is really very early days in terms of where I'm heading with this. I have been doing some preliminary work on marketing with Facebook this week, which has been an interesting exercise, and I'm going to come back and do a video specifically on that in a couple of weeks to talk about how you go about setting up a Facebook business page, how you go about signing up for marketing, and then actually going out and doing some marketing to see how that works. And it's actually a very simple and straightforward process, surprisingly. So I will see you next time, and I hope you got something good out of today's video.